Now, at a time when global greenhouse gas emissions are already at a record high, the war in Ukraine is deepening the climate crisis. As per a report by carbon accounting experts, the first 12 months of the war triggered a net increase of 120 million tons of greenhouse gases. The report, due to be released on the sidelines of the United Nations Climate Summit in Bonn this week, looks at several contributors to emissions, from fuel used by vehicles to forest fires to changes in energy use in Europe. Ukraine's Environment Ministry claims Russia's invasion has inflicted more than $51 billion in terms of environmental damage in Ukraine.
We didn't expect that the emissions of a war would be so significant, and it's not only the military, the warfare itself that contributes to the emissions, but it's also the future reconstruction of the destroyed infrastructure like buildings, hospitals, and roads.
Now, carbon accounting will be in focus at the COP28 Climate Summit in Dubai this year. Experts suggest it is crucial that Russia-Ukraine military emissions are included as part of the discussions.
We're looking to achieve two impacts. First of all, to show to the world what damage Russia is doing, not only to Ukraine, but to the climate as well, climate which is all ours. Secondly, we also, want to pinpoint that emissions of conflicts and military missions are often overlooked. And with this report, we want to have governments focusing on military missions as well.
Now, according to the report titled Climate Damage Caused by Russia's War in Ukraine, almost half of the net increase in emissions is linked to anticipated reconstruction of buildings, roads and factories damaged during the war. Meanwhile, about 19% of the emissions came from military activities such as burning fuel in vehicles, making and firing ammunition, and construction of concrete fortifications. The overall tally includes greenhouse gas emissions from outside the Ukraine conflict, such as gas leaks from the sabotaged Nord Stream pipeline. It also accounts for rerouting of international flights and movement of refugees. The report acknowledges that there has been a drop in Ukraine's domestic economic activity due to the conflict, but says that the emissions related to those activities has largely shifted to other countries now. It also concludes, that there's been a fall in emissions in Europe from lower flows of Russian gas and a drop in electricity usage due to higher energy costs. This has almost completely been offset by increase in use of oil, coal, and liquefied natural gas. For more on this, Ivina Zasiadko, who is the head of the climate department at Eco Action Center for Environmental Initiatives, now joins us live from Ukraine. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, my first question to you: Russia's invasion, it's inflicted more than $51 billion in environmental damage on Ukraine, as per the Ukrainian Environment Ministry. Now, the human cost of the war has been devastating, and now this. What is your assessment of the impact of this war on the environment?
Yeah, I think this number, like 51, is just first numbers. Eco Action and my colleagues, like our volunteers together, since the full-scale invasion, since the February 2022, we are monitoring all what Russia is doing in Ukraine, and so far we have the database of more than 1,061 cases, but we actually know that it's not the full data, because if you would open the regional information, we would see that actually Donetsk and Lugansk, even not the top regions which been affected and have these cases, even though this region since 2014 is occupied by Russia, it's affected by Russia, there's bombing and shellings happening since then, and since February there was like a lot of heavy attacks. But unfortunately, we don't have access to the territory, so we don't know what's happening there. So the scale of this war to the environment, we would actually know only after the war is stopped, and we can actually evaluate everything what happened by Russia in Ukraine. But yesterday, probably like the whole world was saw that Russia blew up the hydropower plant station Kakhovka dam. So it's now caused that almost 80 settlements, cities, villages will be flooded in the next days. So yesterday we saw a lot of video how the Kherson city is like have sometimes water like more than 1 meter in some places. So the water is coming and it's gonna come like in next 4 days. It's by the data of authorities, and maybe like in a few days we would understand actually what impact it has on the environment, on citizens.
Now, right, on the other hand, what structures do you think need to be put in place to check the surge in the use of oil, coal, liquefied natural gas in all of Europe that has also been in some ways impacted by the invasion of Ukraine?
Yeah, it's what we are doing now inside Ukraine and outside of Ukraine. We're trying to advocate for the developing renewable energy, especially decentralized renewable energy. We see it as a solution as for Ukraine, because after the bombings during the winter when the Russia attacked our thermal power plant stations, they still occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant station. So there is still high risk that the next winter would be again tough in Ukraine, and we would lose the electricity while the winter in Ukraine is very cold. Sometimes we have like minus 15. So to survive, we need this electricity. So it's important to have this decentralized system. So for Russia, it would be hard to attack like 100,000 small scale solar panels, wind, and any other sources of energy. Same situation should be in Europe, to become like independent, to not depend on the fossil fuel, which is also causing a climate change. So before the war, the top topic at the all international discussion was climate change, and now Russia actually affected a lot the all communication, the discussion about the climate change. So the focus a bit shifted from the climate change to Ukraine, which is like I'm very thankful as a Ukrainian, because we really need the help. But at the same time, the climate change is happening. We see that more fires, more floods is happening. Now the south part of Europe was also had like a super heat temperature, which is like was not normal for that period. So we see that it's still happening, and we need to act rapidly. By the scientist data, we need to actually act until this decade, until 2030. We need to decrease emission for 50%. So the war actually can help to shift, because we saw the risk when you just have one resource. For example, in Ukraine, 50% of energy resource, is 50% is nuclear. So when the Russia is destroyed or occupied, one risk is environmental impact, another risk that we are losing a huge resource, and to restore it, it would be maybe even impossible. So at the same time, this example shows that the decentralized system, the renewable energy system, can actually help to survive many other consequences as a war or anything else, to be more independent, and of course to reduce emission and to reduce impact on climate change.
Right, Ms. Asadko, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast with your insights on this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.